Welcome to tip number 2 in the mod movement. So I'm titling this one, Knowing When It's Enough. And let's see, so the extreme version of that would be overdoing or underdoing, right? And it's really easy to do either one of those. That's the easy. Extremes, remember, are easy. Easy extremes, that's easy to remember. But moderation is an M turns upside down, turn the M upside down, and you get work. So moderation is work. Moderation is effort. You have to consciously choose into moderation. So the moderation is knowing and discerning when is something enough or too much, or when have I hit the just right. Kind of like Goldilocks, and the porridge. She had one was too hot, one was too cold, and one was just right. And that's what we're trying to learn to discern. A lot of work in the moderation movement is learning to discern, and we will talk about that as we go through these tips. You'll learn how I've learned to discern, and maybe you can implement some of those techniques. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about something I mentioned in the first, like my intro video of the moderation voice. There are other names for that voice, but the one I'm going to use for this teaching is the moderation voice. And I'll get to that in just a minute. So I want to talk, before I get into my stories, I want to talk about a few just principles. So the extremes are really, when you get boiled right down to it, extremes are elements of truth mingled with a lie. Usually we're pretty smart, and so we recognize a truth, and so the extreme has to usually have an element of truth in there in order for us to buy into it. So extremes are usually an element of truth mingled with a lie. They're often fear-based or pride-based, and or both. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then moderation is truth. It's just truth. Moderation is where the truth is, the full truth, the complete truth. It's also where trust is. It takes trust in something bigger than yourself, for me, God, to live in a moderate way. And we'll get more into that as we talk about these things. But truth, trust, and humility are what it takes to be a moderate person. If you think about the ultimate example that I've mentioned in the other one, tip number 1, the ultimate example of moderation is Jesus Christ. He is the one who modeled it perfectly. Now, none of us are going to do that, but we are to strive for it. We're to strive to be like him. And so he lived the happiest way there is to live. There is no happier existence than who Christ is, the way he lives, the way he thinks, the way he does things. That's why he's our perfect exemplar. So moderation is truth, trust, and humility based. And extremes are lie, fear, and pride based. Okay, so let me give you a couple examples of those things. For the extremes, think about the lies or the truth, partial truth, that's in some of these statements. I'm not enough. I'll never be enough. If others succeed, I fail. There is truth. Others do succeed. And frankly, sometimes people are better at something than you are. That's truth. But does that mean that you really are a failure because you're not as good at something as someone else is, or look exactly like someone else does? Or you may not feel enough sometimes. There may be things you get asked to do that are way beyond your scope. I have that a lot in my life. But that doesn't mean I'm not enough to take it on. And frankly, because I'm not alone, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Maybe on your own, you're not enough for what you have to take on. But the beautiful thing about the moderation movement is you're never alone. And when you finally get that, I think you will lose a lot of your fear. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. Okay, so here's more lies. If others have more than I do, if others have more than I do, then I'm lacking in some way. There's other philosophies in the extremes. They're like, do anything to win. So it's like, I've got to be on the top in order to feel good. So I will do whatever it takes to win. That's going to make you a very unhappy person. Loneliness tends to be a common characteristic of people living in extremes. They seem like they might have everything, but if you often really get to like listen to them, you will find out that they're incredibly lonely people. And we'll understand more of that when we talk about the moderation version. They often have low self-esteem. They seem like they have really good self-esteem. That's the facade that they present to the world. But the truth is that they really don't have a good self-esteem. And that's why they have to be the best, or I'm the worst. They like give into it completely. So meaning that they're living in one of those extremes. So the extremes are self-preserving. So anyone who's living in the extreme world is a self-preserving, very self-focused person. And that could be self-focused in, I'm going to be the best, or it could be self-focused in, I'm going to be the worst, or I'm not going to do anything, or I'm not good enough to do that, so why try? Like, so there's the two extremes, the depression, super like, I can't do anything, or I'm going to do it all. So that's the extremes, just some little examples of that. And now the moderation versions of that are, I'm not alone. And if you recognize that you have, first of all, that nobody's your enemy, that people are not your enemy. One of my instructors recently that I really love, he's with the Arbinger Institute, which I highly recommend the Arbinger Institute's material. And I was planning on mentioning that in this recording. One of them has a book called Bonds That Make Us Free, and it's by C. Terry Warner. Anyways, in that book, he says something that I really love. He says a lot of things I really love in there, but one of them was, seeing others as the problem is the problem. So in an extreme world, that's what you see. You can't be the problem, and so you have to deflect. You have to lie to yourself in some way to make it so that someone else is the problem. Because if it's you, what will that do to your sense of self-worth, self-esteem, whatever? So seeing other people as the problem is a problem. But he also said something else that I really loved. And he said, if they're not the monster that you make them out to be, if they're not the sole problem, then who is? See, we always have to feel like there's a villain. And so that means you, right? You're the monster. You're the problem. But the truth is, and I really like this part, he said the truth is neither one of you are. And that doesn't mean we don't do monstrous things. But his point is that our true core wants to do right by others, and something's getting in the way of that. And so I highly recommend his book, Bonds That Make Us Free. That was just a little taste, and maybe a little too much out of maybe not enough depth of explanation on that. But my point is, we're not meant to be alone. We're not in competition with each other. We need to stop seeing each other as the enemies and start realizing that we're here to actually help each other learn, progress, grow, and experience life, and all the lessons that life can give us. So we're not alone. But the other massive one, because sometimes you may truly be in situations where outside of your control, you are a true victim of other people's really poor choices. You are still not alone. There are good people, frankly, in the world who are trying to help others, but there is also a Savior, Jesus Christ, who is there for everyone. And he can walk through those horrible places with you. You don't have to be alone. Remember, the straightening out of the rows, the messiness of the rows, who was standing by that woman? It was the Savior. And I think he walks with all of us. Even when it doesn't make sense, how could he stay with us when we're in a situation that is awful, horrid, and frankly, sometimes downright completely evil? And yet he is. And this life is not the end all be all. Remember that, because it helps you see things more in context. And that's actually one of my other tips. So we'll save that one. We'll put a pin in that one. But you're not alone. People that are living in moderation have a healthy sense of self-worth. They have a healthy self-esteem. They have healthy and improvingly healthy relationships with other people. When you live in moderation, you will become more healthy. That book, Bonds That Make Us Free, I think it means bonds of love that make us free, but it really teaches you how to have healthy relationships with others. So good. Okay. So another moderation mindset would be, I have what I need. Like, what I truly need will be provided. It's not this, the extremes is like, there's not enough. There's not enough for everyone. It's a very limited mindset. It's a very scarcity mindset. But people that live in moderation have more of an abundant mindset. They have a more like, everything I truly need will be provided mindset. And if you are Christian, you know that God's already promised that he would take care of what you need, that he will. If you trust in him and you put your faith and confidence in him, he will take care of you. And sometimes that care comes over time. And so anyways, that's a whole nother lesson. Okay. So I can achieve all that really matters is more of a moderation mindset. So some of the extremes, and I'm going to talk about this so I can go into the moderation one, is that you have, so two of the extremes in the world of not moderation are totally self-focused. That's all you're thinking about. Or this one I've fallen into both, but one of the other camps I've fallen into is totally selfless, like, meaning I'm talking about in a very unhealthy, like, you never care about your needs. It's always everyone else's needs that come first. And that one, the doormat one, may make some people happier with you, but it will destroy you inside. So the moderation of those two is good self-care and an outward mindset. So you look outward, you focus outward on others, but you also take good care of yourself. And that one took a long time for me to learn. But it was a very important lesson for me. It was very life-saving for me. So that's a moderation person, is that they can do that. And they don't feel better than others. That's huge. In that actually helps you with not feeling like an enemy to others. When they can feel that you don't feel that you're better than them, you don't feel like their enemy. And then that builds relationships. So, okay. So I wanted to talk about that voice. And so let me go back to that moderation voice, like understanding it, discerning it. So when we're in the service of the Lord, his works cannot be frustrated. I think it's really important to understand that. He has kind of the long game in mind when he's working on things. Sometimes it takes him generations to keep his promises, but he can always keep his promises. And so trusting in the person you're following is really important. You need to come to know him to understand who he is and why you should trust him. And that's a journey that you'll need to go on at some point if you want to understand what I'm saying. But that moderation voice is him. It's the Holy Spirit. It's him working through the Holy Spirit, or the light of Christ is another name that we can call it. Some people call it the conscience. But what it is it's that inner understanding, that inner knowing of basic right, wrong. This is okay. This is not okay. This is doing right by another person. You can feel when that comes, and you can trust that voice because it's the moderate voice. It's the one that speaks truth. Okay, so how to discern? I was learning that God's works cannot be frustrated. So if you're feeling frustrated in the work of the Lord, you're not doing it his way. You're doing it in an extreme way. And this came at a pretty important time in my life. I mentioned that I kind of had a breakdown about 5 years ago. Well, part of that breakdown was a rebuild. So every time you get broken down, that's actually God just making you better. And he's going to rebuild you even better than you can possibly imagine. But it is scary when you have a breakdown. Like when he breaks you down, it can be incredibly frightening, because our natural instincts, our natural man, the extreme version of us, always wants comfort, always wants to not be out of our comfort zone. And so it's very uncomfortable when he breaks you down. And anyways, so that can be challenging. Well, I was having one of those massive moments. And as I came out of that, one of the first lessons that he started teaching me was this kind of knowing when's enough. I was kind of an overachiever all the time, like to the detriment of my health, oftentimes to the detriment of my family. And, you know, it just was like, we got to rebuild this. We got to completely knock down what you've been doing and rebuild it in a moderate way. And so it's good to help others and it's good to take care of ourselves, but understanding how those two coincide, how they come together. So one day I had been asked, they were asking for volunteers at my kids' school to read a story and bring a treat. And I felt I should do that. I felt I should offer my services in that way. That's the moderation voice. It was speaking to my heart and mind that, yes, you should help with that. I was like, okay, I'm a very busy woman, but I felt that and I knew it was right. And so I did. So the day of it comes, I need to make the treat. And I've got this window of time to make this treat. And so I start making the treat and I think I'm going to double this recipe so I can save half for later. And yeah, so I can save half for later. And I hear a distinct impression come into my mind and I could feel it as well. Don't double it. And I was like, no. Now, you don't always recognize that voice is the moderation voice. You sometimes just dismiss it as a crazy thought or you dismiss it. The moderation voice is easy to dismiss. That's actually one of the ways you know it's him, is because it's like, I could dismiss it easily. We'll talk more about that in one of our later tips. Okay, so anyways, I did. I dismissed it. I was like, no, I can, it just makes sense. I'm already doing the work. I might as well just double it. And it comes again. Don't double it. And I push it away again. And I'm like, no, it's kind of like, I know what I'm doing. So I don't realize that I'm arguing with that spirit, the moderation voice. And so I do my thing. Well, it doesn't take long. Now I'm fully committed. I've got all the ingredients mixed up. I've got to cook it all. And it was something that needed to be done then. It was one of those kind of things, like you knew it then, or it's not going to work. And so now I realize, to my horror, I can't finish it in time. It's too much. And I've forgotten all about that little warning voice that tried to save me all that stress and frustration. And I start thinking different thoughts. I start thinking, oh my goodness, why do I do this to myself? Why do I overcommit myself? I shouldn't have said yes to doing this thing, and now I'm going to be late. And so I could start going down this spiral, this downward spiral. And anyways, I finish up the stuff. Now I'm late. I'm running behind. So I get down there and I'm a little late, which I hate being late. And because it's not respectful of other people's time. And so I get in there, kind of squeak in, and I do my reading thing. The whole way there, I'm just berating myself, right? Or mad, upset, because I always, I get put in these situations where I'm feeling like the victim. So read Bonds That Make Us Free. It'll teach you about that. But anyway, so I get there, have the experience. I pull kind of out of my frustration to have a good experience with these children. And then as I'm leaving to go home, that moderation voice comes back and reminds me that I knew I was supposed to volunteer for that. I knew that was the right thing. So that wasn't the problem. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I knew I was supposed to do that. Okay. And then it reminded me of its little nudges. I call them little nudges, to only make one batch, like to not double it. And I was like, oh my goodness, that was the voice. And if I had listened, all that frustration would have been gone. All of it. It would have never happened. I wouldn't even known that it was, I wouldn't have even known about it. So I wouldn't have gone down that path. things worked out. They often do anyways. But man, do they have to be that hard? No, they don't. So listen to those nudges, those little moderation, that moderation voice that tells you this is what's enough. This is what's sufficient for this experience. And so I'm a little wiser now since then. I've had probably almost 5 years of practicing with that now. And I don't beat myself up as much as I used to about that. I am okay with saying no, because the moderation voice will help you know when it's time to say no. The moderation voice will help you know when it's time to compromise and when it's time to just say yes, and when it's time to only make one batch and not be so proactive. So anyways, listen to that voice. It's hugely important. Okay, checking my notes here. As you listen to the moderation voice, as you try to listen and really tune into being a moderate person, you will realize, as I talked about, it's not a lonely world. So it's okay to ask for help. It's okay when you're given an assignment from the moderation voice to serve or to lift or to do something that you may feel unqualified for, or not ready for, or whatever, or maybe not brave enough to do. But you can ask for help. The Lord, when he gives us a command, or an invitation is probably a better word, when he gives us an invitation to become a better person and to live more true to our core, he also provides a way to keep that invitation if we choose to embark on that journey with him, if we choose to accept it, to choose into it. And so ask for that help. I ask for it all the time. I ask for strength beyond my own. I ask for faith beyond my own. I ask for courage beyond my own often. I ask for greater trust. I ask for additional reassurances, because sometimes I will feel that I need to do this, and then I'll get going with it. And you may be like me. Sometimes you get real nervous once you get started on something, because it's often outside of your comfort zone. And I might need an additional, especially for really big things, I might need an additional reassurance that I'm on the right track, and he will do that for you. And sometimes his reassurance is I already told you, trust me. I've had that many times. Okay. So that same voice that speaks that moderation to us, or gives us those little nudges, will also help you achieve it. You are not alone in the mod movement. So when it is normal to feel stress, stress is part of life, right? But there's different kinds. There's the kind that is just because something's new, and so, it causes a little more anxiousness or whatever. But there are ways to kind of calm yourself and help yourself be more of a moderate person. So I encourage you to look at basic techniques that will help you calm yourself when you are feeling one of the extremes of overwhelm, or overstressed, or overtaxed, or over whatever, or underwhelmed, you don't feel any stress at all because you've chosen to check out of life. When you're feeling one of those extremes, you can actually help yourself get back to where you can hear that moderate voice. And so some of the ways to do that are breathing techniques. There are many, but one of them is called box breathing. You can look it up, but it's a 4-4-4. You breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, you breathe out for 4 seconds, and you hold it for 4 seconds. And that actually can help reset the sympathetic nervous system and get you to where you can hear the moderation voice. It's actually hard to hear the moderation voice if you're in real strong fear. So the extremes are usually in fight or flight. So remember I said it's mostly fear-based. So fight or flight, freeze, fawn. Those are the 4 fear-based survival instincts responses that we can have to situations that we deem threatening in some way. Comparison kind of puts you in fight or flight, by the way. And so you want to get out of that, because where you're going to hear moderation, that voice, is when you're kind of in a state of I'm listening and I'm ready to respond. I'm wanting to respond. But even if you're in fight or flight, God will help you. So pray. Prayer is another way to help yourself get out of that fight or flight. Just be honest. God can handle your honesty. Just tell him, I am struggling. I know I'm supposed to be working on this, but I am so afraid. This is really shutting me down. I can feel that I'm in an extreme. Help me rebalance. Help me get back to kind of my center. So let's see, meditation. Some people meditate. That's a great way. Trying to just tune out the world. Turn down the noise. We live in a very fast-paced, noisy world. And so give yourself phone breaks, computer breaks, TV breaks, music breaks. Give yourself time where you can actually be still. Go sit outside for 5 minutes. Let the sun come down on you. If it's not a sunny day, just sit outside and listen to the wind, or look at the trees, or whatever you can. Get yourself outside for a few minutes. That could actually massively help you get back into a place where you can hear that moderation voice. So turn down the noise, give yourself time to practice listening to that voice. And that voice will never give you more than you can truly handle at one time. In fact, one of my techniques that I used for a while, I call it my one step, like one action step. And so when I'm feeling, sometimes I get overwhelmed because I move out of trust and faith into fear. And that happens. Like Peter walked on the water and he did this miraculous thing, but then he started seeing the winds and the waves boisterous, and it caused him to doubt and to fear. And as soon as he took his eyes and his focus off of Christ and looked sideways, don't look sideways, he sank, right? But then what? He reached out and said, Lord, save me. And the Lord reached down and pulled him back up to the surface. God will do that for you. So one of the ways that I ask for that help is I will say a prayer and just ask for one thing to do. Just give me one thing to do. As a woman, we often have the millions of things in our head all the time, right? That we need to get accomplished, and it's all important. So I will ask him, just give me one thing. And then I do that one thing until it's done. And if I'm still in fight or flight, if I'm still feeling like I'm not at a peaceful, like I'm okay state, then I will pray for my next one thing. And I will do that until I'm okay. And so that's a tool that I've used for a while. So practice listening to that moderation voice. He will help you know what is enough, how much is just right, and then trust it. And it's okay if you don't trust it at first, but you will come, if you'll keep practicing with it, you'll come to trust it. And that will lead you to a much happier, much more peaceful, much more fulfilling life. You won't feel like you're failing all the time. And that is such a good feeling. So go practice. Thanks, guys.